Hello everyone, I'm Darcy Bono, and in this video I'm going to show you how to paint the notorious color white. Now in the past this was a dreaded color because so many paints on the market were very chunky, as white paint has the largest pigment particles. That's kind of a problem of the past, as there are several brands out there now, which I'll discuss with you later, that actually have amazingly nice, smooth whites. So there were problems with the paints in the past, but another thing that makes white a bit different, not harder to paint, but different, is that it has very subtle midtones, and what this means is that it relies very heavily on accenting the shadows in order to achieve definition, and you're going to see this when you look at the following pictures. So focus on the color of these recesses. If you're doing a warm white, you're going to have much more brown in the recesses, with it slowly proceeding up to more of a cream color. If you do a neutral white, you're going to have gray in your recesses, and if you do a cold white, it's going to have a blue tone to the recesses. So choose which of those you want moving forward with your white. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a cold white. But if you'd also like to know how I paint the warm white you see on the World Eaters here, there is a link in the video description. Okay, so let's get started. Before you do anything, prime your miniature in, big surprise, white. This is going to set up a nice smooth surface for you to work on, and before you start to do any white armor whatsoever, do literally everything else, every single detail. The reason we're doing this is because it's a lot easier to paint over any mistakes now than when you have your shading and recesses already done. And for example, if you accidentally get another color on your white base coat, I highly recommend Pro Acryl Bold Titanium White by Monument Hobbies. They are a sponsor of mine, but I use them every day. Their white is so smooth and so opaque and takes care of any errors insanely fast. Next, we're going to make our shade color. This is going to carry the entire process. All this is 3 drops Apothecary White Contrast Paint, 2 drops Lahmian Medium, and then 1 drop of Space Wolves Gray to give a nice bluish cold tone to our shade coat. For this next step, let me emphasize, do not coat this entire miniature. We're going to be working in portions. This technique relies on the surface of the miniature to remain wet, and if you work on the miniature as a whole rather than in portions, things are going to dry too quickly. So the first step, pick part of the model and coat it in just straight Lahmian Medium. The reason we're using this instead of contrast medium is because Lahmian Medium creates a little bit more flow, whereas contrast medium tints the raised portions. We don't want that. We want it to flow into the recesses as much as possible. This is also going to set up a layer that will allow our shade to diffuse away from where we first apply it, as well as sink into the recesses automatically. And for this first part, I'm actually going to use gravity to help the shade coat settle in the recesses. So I see that his abs are where the recesses are, and I'm just lightly applying that shade coat we made in that area. And it automatically flows in there because of the Lahmian Medium surface we just applied. And turns out the zoom on my phone actually works way better than I thought it did, so here's a closer look. So all I'm doing is just lightly patting this. I'm not swiping it or drenching it. I'm letting the Lahmian Medium pretty much do all the work and just pushing around the shade coat to where it needs to be. And I can hear it. Someone's going, okay, lady, well, you did the textured portions. What about those flat squares on his hips there? Well, it works for that too. You just have to think about how the light hits. So apply your Lahmian Medium like that, and then come in with your shade coat, and all it does is take a little more spreading around. So take your shade coat, apply it, wipe your brush off, and then spread it around like that. You just want the darker points near the bottom, that's all. Depending on where your light's coming from, really, but that's generally how I do mine. So, ta-da! Okay, I'm sure you get the gist by now, but this is such a perfect demonstration of how easy this is on a relatively smooth surface. Here I am coating the backpack in Lahmian Medium, coming in again with our shade coat and just dropping it right on top not really doing anything special here, and it automatically diffuses. So really the only thing you need to do is just keep an eye on where this shade coat is saturating. If it starts to oversaturate an area, you can always just take a damp brush and soak up some of the excess shade. So that's it. That's really all you need to do at this point. And if, heaven forbid, you oversaturated an area and didn't notice it until it dried, there's no problem. You know how to get this off-white color because all it is white meets your shade coat. So in order to fix this, to create a lighter version of the recess you just made that may have oversaturated an area that didn't need it, is take your white and mix it with your shade coat until you get a light enough off-white to go over the darkened parts that don't need to be that dark. That's all I did here. I don't have a set ratio because it depends on how much you oversaturated it, but mix your white with a little bit of your shade coat until you get something that's close to what the surface should be. So as you can see on his heel, I'm just lightly layering it out. I mixed white with a pinch of the shade coat and I'm just spreading it over that oversaturated area, but we're still retaining our definition from the shade that went into the recesses. And if you want to add a bit more definition to your miniature, once it's completely dried, you can always go back in and apply the same shade coat you've been using to some of the more defined recesses just to increase their shadow saturation a little bit more. This is a completely optional step if you just want to add a little bit more detail to your miniature. You really don't need to do this on your standard troops unless you want to. I generally reserve it for hero units like this guy. One final step you can take for a bit more definition is a good old-fashioned edge highlight using a pure white. Now this is the white I used to correct any errors in my original base coat. This is Pro-Acryl Bold Titanium White, and I am just running it on the absolute sharpest edges of the miniature. And here he is, all finished up, looking nice and crisp and clean. And I get it, some of you may be thinking, well, shouldn't he be weathered? He's standing on urban ruins. And yes, realistically, that should be the case. However, this is art. You can make it look how you want. I like my guys looking clean because I think that's how the Imperium envisions itself, as this shining beacon of clean, happy hope amongst a universe of grim grunge. So that is pretty much it. One note before we go, just because I mentioned it earlier. In this video, you've seen Pro-Acryl Bold Titanium White by Monument Hobbies. That is my preferred white due to its fluidity and its opacity and overall coverage. However, if you're looking for other brands that have very good whites, I highly recommend Vallejo Dead White, as well as AK Interactive Intense White. You really can't go wrong with any of those three. I've had great results with all of them. So I hope you found that helpful, and until we meet again, happy painting, everyone.